Okay, I want to welcome everyone to week 11 of xEssentials. Tonight's a really exciting topic on Audacity, creating voiceovers, editing music, creating medleys, etc., all things Audacity. Carl Mirsky has a long experience and track record with Audacity, and he's a good friend to all Christmas lighting world. So, Carl, I'm turning it over to you.
All right, thanks. I don't know about expert, and I don't know about being a professional, but
got to build you up there, Carl.
That's right. No, I appreciate that. No expectations, right? So, and I got a tough crowd. I got Tom Betgeorge on here, so that's a tough crowd already. So I've been doing. I guess I've been doing animated lights now since 2010. Always did displays before that, and so. One of the things that I like to do, and I've always liked to do, is the audio editing. This is not going to be a professional type of class, but really using Audacity. I know there's other tools out there. There's more professional tools out there, but most of what we use in our hobby and in the community, we can do using Audacity. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go do an overview of it, a high-level overview. And then we're going to do some editing of audio files, music files. So, how do you get rid of dead space, both, at the beginning, at the end, in the middle? A lot of folks are interested in creating a mashup or a medley of songs, custom audio file, so multi-layer track. So anytime you want to do maybe, you kind of want to do a voiceover, and we'll also be doing voiceovers too, but you want to have voice, you want to have with music, or you want to have one music and kind of roll into another. And then there was some questions that I had asked for. I'd ask people, hey, is there anything you're interested in? So we'll kind of go through those as well. So please feel free to ask questions, and we will go from there. So first of all, Audacity. The latest version is 2.3.1. I just installed it actually on my other machines. I haven't installed it on this one yet. But the installation is fairly simple. I want to just kind of walk through that because it doesn't automatically alert you and say, hey, there's a new version. So I always go out and look about every 3 to 6 months. They don't put a lot of versions out, but when they do, sometimes they'll add other functionality. And it's a pretty good tool. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do in it that we're just going to kind of scratch the surface. There is a 64-bit version for you Mac aficionados. If you are running the 64-bit, you need to install the 64-bit add-ins as well. So there's FFmpeg, LAME, MP3. So these are used for both importing and exporting other audio types. So LAME, for example, if you're going to export, if you're going to use MP3s, you need to install LAME. It's not part of the Audacity package, usually for licensing and copyright reasons, but they're easy to obtain. From an xLights perspective, we use the Queen Mary Vamp plugins, which most of you are familiar with, or all of you are familiar with. So we've got the beats, the bars, those type of effects. So it gives you the basic effects you need. I mean, most people can run with those. There are others. There's Nyquist, there's VST, there's LV2, which was originally based on Linux. And you can go to the audacityteam.org website. And then for these other plugins, you can download them there as well. And then we'll kind of walk through the different plugins and how you would install them. Audacity is donationware, so it's free to use. They don't charge a dime. So yeah, it's about the same cost as xLights, but donating is a good idea because Audacity's been around for a long time. And as far as again, a freeware program, it's one of the best out there. So I kind of want to go through, first of all, the basics, right? So let me close this down. But there is a toolbox, right? So this is kind of like your primary tool set where you can move around and do a lot of your basic functions. So there's a selection tool, envelope tool, draw tool, zoom tool, move tool, and multi-tool. So we'll kind of go through those. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to go ahead and open up a file. So I've got an audio file here, and we'll go ahead and open it up. So this should look familiar to you. So let's go ahead and start with the box. And these are really easy to get to because they're basically F1 through F6. So this is going to be your selection tool, which again is primarily going to be, hang on one second. Okay, so primarily going to be for selecting sections in your waveform in your audio track. So a lot of the activities that you're going to do within Audacity, you're going to have this tool selected, the big I, right? And so that way you can go ahead and select sections. You can select a whole area. If you want to select the whole track, you would just click over here, or you can do a Control A. So there's different ways to use that. The second tool, this is the envelope tool, and a lot of people, I didn't know what it was for a long time. I was like, what is that, right? But the envelope tool, you'll notice that it now changes your waveform. And what it's really used for, and we were playing around with audio volume before, so this could be interesting. What the envelope tool gives you the ability to do is to increase or decrease the gain or the volume. So I'm going to go ahead and play, this section here. You can see where it moved, right? So I'm going to go ahead and play a section here at one volume. So what it does is it gives you the ability to automatically take a section and you can increase and decrease the volume, so you can do the whole thing. So this is kind of powerful, especially if you want to ramp up or ramp down sections. So you can see where as I click, I'm creating a break, and that break is where I can then go ahead and increase or decrease the volume. So now if I go ahead and play this back, go back to my selection tool. So you get the idea, right? So it's really good for if you have sections where you really want to go down and dirty, you want to increase and decrease volume. It's actually kind of pretty neat. So what we're going to do now is we can undo. There's a lot of undo capability within Audacity, which is nice. You can also view what your steps were. The third tool is going to be your draw tool. Now, the draw tool is kind of an interesting tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that one off, and we're going to go to the zoom tool, right? So with the zoom tool, as you can see, if I click on the zoom tool, I can automatically zoom in and zoom out, right? So I'm just zooming in here automatically. And you look at these little dots here, right? This is where the power, we start getting into Audacity with highs and lows. So let's say that now you're down at the individual bit here. And let's say that you want to, this was a high bit. Maybe I can find one that's a little higher. Probably not in the wave. But let's say for a sake you want to go ahead and you want to change this bit. What you can do is you can go into the draw tool and you can actually select that bit and you can increase or decrease it. So if this was a sound or you had a section in your audio that was a group of sounds and you wanted to really get in there and get down to the infinitesimal ridiculous, you can actually change those. And these are good if you have clicks and pops and other sounds where you don't want to necessarily adjust a section of a audio track, but you want to go down to the individual elements here. So it's pretty powerful. You can see here, so there's your high. So let's say that was a high. Let's say that was a high note there, right? Kind of too far down. But if it was that high note there, and you can kind of hear that pop, I could go in there and now I can decrease it, right? So it's pretty powerful for me to be able to go do that. And with the zoom tool here, I can go right in there. And there's where I went ahead and did that. I can easily now go back in here on my draw tool, and I can decrease those down to a normal level. So I don't necessarily have to remove them. I can just go ahead and decrease them. So now you'd have those at a normal level. So pretty powerful. Okay, we'll go back in here. All right. Then we have the time shift tool. Now the time shift tool is useful when you're working with maybe multiple tracks, or you want to split a track. And again, you notice here, I can select the time shift tool and I can go ahead and move that audio track. So let's say that I've got an audio track and I want to have an introduction before that. I want to have something before that. I can easily select this time shift tool and then I can go ahead and I can move it. So Ed, your question is, can you select multiple at one time? Were you talking about with the draw tool?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go back here. Let's go back here with the draw tool. Okay. So if I select here, and let's try it. No. So it is individual, right? So it's going to be your individual notes here. So there, you can't select a group and then do them at the group. If you wanted to do that, you would then do it at, you'd use another method, right? For going ahead and increasing and decreasing the volume, which we're going to get into in the effects. You can also, again, use the envelope tool if you wanted to do that. All right. And then there's the multi-tool. And so the multi-tool, the star, that gives you everything. So I don't like to use the multi-tool because you end up doing a lot of moving around, and I'm not that adept. But you'll notice here, I can go ahead, and if I start clicking and dragging, I can go ahead and I can select. I can go ahead and I can drill down. I can get down where I can use my tools. So I try not to use that because for the most part, I'm very simple. I can do one thing at a time. So those are the tools. But for the most part, the ones I use, I'm going to use the select tool and then the time shift tool or the transport tool. Other things, you know, in the main menu or the main screen, we've got for our sound, typically I leave it on Windows Direct Sound. Unless you're having problems, whatever your default is, leave it there. Your microphone, this would be for when you're recording the mic, if you have multiple mics. Here I've got a mic on my webcam and I also have my Yeti mic. And so I've got the Yeti selected. Your recording, you can record in mono and stereo. And that's important because for the most part, when I'm doing voice tracks, recording a voice, typically I like to do it in mono. A, it saves bandwidth, and B, unless I really have a need for stereo, I'll explain why when we get down to some of the tricks about removing voice from an audio. And then your speakers, which speakers you want to use. So it's pretty powerful. Up here, this is really where you would start adjusting your settings, right? So if you're going to use your microphone here, you can actually adjust it, and now you can see in real time before you start recording what your levels are. And for those of you who are familiar with clipping and audio, you never really want this to start getting into this range, because once it starts getting up here, you start getting into clipping. So you really want to make sure you can adjust that and then keep it down into this range right here. Same thing with the sound. Obviously, you want to keep your audio down because you don't want that clipping or cracking sound. Go ahead and turn that off. Let's see, what else? Obviously, you've got other ways to zoom in and zoom out. You have other ways to fit the selection. So this is good. So let's say that I go ahead and I zoom this in, right? And now I say, well, I can't see everything here and I really don't want to slide across. So one of the things I can do is I can go ahead and I can fit the selection to the width of the screen. So now I can see my whole audio file here. And let's say now I wanted to fit the entire project because I may have more than one audio track on here. I can fit the project. Another thing you can do is you can do Control F. Control F does the same thing, and Control Shift F actually takes your waves and it'll actually fill up your screen. So if you're like me and you have old eyes and you're really trying to get down to, okay, what am I looking at here? You can do that as well. So there's different ways to view the waveforms and to view the music itself. Any questions so far? All right. Let's see. So, okay. So let's get into, let's see. Let's go back to our presentation here. All right. So now we're going to get into kind of the music audio file. So what we're going to do is we're going to take an audio file, and now we're going to remove dead space. So we're going to remove that sound that sometimes you don't necessarily want to have in your audio for whatever reason, for time, or it's just a long intro or a long outro. And so what typically we do is we'll normalize the audio, we'll equalize it, we'll use an equalizer, and you don't have to do these steps, right? So this is all personal preference. Again, for the most part, when we're dealing with audio for our shows, they're either using an outdoor set of speakers or they're going through someone's car stereo. But again, those of us who have OCD want to make sure that we want to get it right. We want to be able to hear the music, and in some cases, it does make a difference. And then your fade-ins, your fade-outs. And then we're going to go into some other tips and tricks after we get through that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to use this same audio file. So with Audacity, it gives you a lot of features. So we're going to go ahead and open this up. It'll save everything. It'll always ask you to save if you want to save. So first thing, we're going to go ahead and turn this down so it's not too loud. You'll notice it gives me my box here. Now, what I did was I just opened an audio file. So in all honesty, that I can open one at a time. If I go to open another one, right, it's going to open it up in another screen. So now I'm going to have two instances of Audacity running. That's not what I want. So what I can do is, let's say I want to work with multiple files, either a voice track and an audio track, or multiple audio tracks, because I'm going to do some blending or overdubbing. What I would do is I would select the import option. And with the import option, I'm going to import the audio, okay? Now I can select more than one. So let's say I wanted to select, let me make sure I got the right file here. So let's say I want to select this, and I want to select this. Right, I want to select these. No, I don't want to select that right now. We'll do these two. Now it's going to go ahead and it's going to bring in both of those files together in separate tracks. So again, it gives me some flexibility. If I want to bring in multiple files, I can go ahead and do that. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually audit a file. And Audacity works with projects. So just like with xLights, where you save your sequence file, and then your sequence file, you would end up rendering it, and then you would end up saving it as an FSEQ file. Think about an Audacity project file as your sequence file, right? So we're going to do the same type of activity here. And so I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to start from scratch. Move this back over. All right. So we're going to use Sleigh Ride here as an example, okay? So one of the things I want to do first of all is I want to, there's no necessarily dead space in here, but let's say that there was. So I'm going to move this over a little. I'm going to zoom in. Let's go ahead and move this. So let's say in this particular file, I wanted to get rid of this right here, right? Turn it down. Because let's say I didn't want that second there, right? So the easy way to do that is I can go ahead and I can select it. And again, if I want to get real granular, I can zoom in and I can kind of see where it starts. So all I have to do is hit the delete key, and it'll basically remove that section. Pretty simple. I can also go up here to the scissors tool and use the scissors tool. Control X does the same thing. So I can go ahead and get rid of that. So because a lot of audio files that we get, especially when we first get them like this, right? So I'm going to play the end of here. They have dead space. Sometimes they have they could have 3 seconds worth of dead space. Well, when we're creating our sequences, do we want several seconds of dead space? Not necessarily. Again, we can go ahead anywhere in the file and we can go ahead and easily delete that section. The other thing we can do is we can delete sections in an audio file itself. So it's not just dead space, it's cleaning it up. I'm going to go ahead and move this back. Oh, wrong tool. Okay. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and let's say I didn't want to start it here, right? For some reason I didn't want to start this file and I didn't want to start it at this particular point. I wanted to start it here. Right? So what I could do is I can delete this whole section. And when I delete that, it's automatically going to move this file to the left, right? Because now it's going to go ahead and remove that space. So it automatically goes ahead and resets everything to 0. So there's definitely a lot of flexibility there. But maybe I didn't want to do that, right? So you can lock files. You can lock the track where it won't move it. It'll actually keep it there so that you have that space. So, but there's lots of different ways you can do that. And this is kind of interesting when, again, you're dealing with a song, like if you're dealing with a TSO song and it's a 5-minute audio file, you know, and you don't want to play the whole thing, you don't want to sequence the whole thing, you can actually cut out sections within there. And it makes it very easy to go ahead and do that. So let's say we want to go ahead, but we want to use this file as it is. And if you notice here, we basically have our left and right track here because we are in stereo. We do have a stereo file. And you really want to have, above the line is going to be your treble, below the line is going to be your bass. And you never want to exceed, obviously, what they call clipping. You never want to exceed this. But one of the things you want to do is a lot of times we'll get audio files that, let me pull one up. A lot of times you'll get audio files that are very quiet. And they have a lot of quiet parts and they have loud parts, like this one. You can notice here it starts off very quiet. Right? And maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want it to be, because in your particular area, you want people to be able to hear it, right? So what you can do is you can amplify it. And again, you can use what we did before. We can use the envelope tool. But you notice we're already kind of at that peak here. So there's not a whole lot we can do. So what do we want to do? We want to normalize this. And again, there's different ways of doing that. But let's say I want to normalize this section here. And so it kind of brings everything to a common decibel, right? So you'll notice now it raised this a little bit, but now it made this really loud, right? So this has been a little bit louder, but this is really loud. So that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to go in here and do it again. I want to normalize this. So let's try it here. Again, the same thing. I'm going to go into my effect and I'm going to normalize or amplify, and I'll show you the difference between the two. Normalize, again, -1 dB is fine. I typically leave the standard options. You can also preview it, right? Now you notice you can even hear where it got louder. And if I hit OK, oh wait, what did I do? I hit the wrong section. Sorry about that. Do that again. Effect, normalize. And you can notice now it increased that whole section. Again, you can break it down because what it's doing is it's getting to that 1 decibel mark, right? There's also the ability to amplify, which is a similar effect. So we can go in here and we can amplify. So we can actually say, what's my new peak amplitude? So it gives me a little more flexibility. Obviously, if I leave it at 0, you notice now it's going to go all the way to the top. So I can go ahead and increase and decrease. But typically what we want to do in our files is when we have a file and we have, they may not be as pronounced, is we would want to go ahead and just normalize the entire track. And that gives us a good baseline. You notice nothing happened because I'm here, I'm already up to 1. So we're at a good starting point. If you don't want this part here, again, you can go ahead and you can increase it. We can amplify this. And let's say we want to amplify this to, we'll say 0.5. Excuse me. You notice we can't go above 0, right? Because now it's going to say we're going to have clipping, and that's a problem. So let's say we want to increase that here. Now you notice I've increased just that section. So that gives me the ability, I can do the whole thing. Now let's say that I wanted to ramp it up more. I can use another effect here, and I can do a fade in or fade out. So a fade in will take it, it'll increase it more gradually. A fade out will increase it, it'll decrease it gradually. But the same thing applies here. So now that I've done that, and this, now I want to equalize it, right? Because now I've got my track, it's somewhat normalized. Now I want to go in here, I want to equalize it. And the EQ that they have in here, again, for audio files, most audio files are already, they're already optimized, but you can go ahead and change them. So I want to go ahead and I want to raise my bass a little bit, and raise my treble a little bit, so I can go into the equalizer tool. So now you notice it increased the file itself on both sides, right? So you get a deeper file, and I've equalized it. And then you can go back in and you can normalize it again, because we're shifting it back and forth within the sounds. And what you end up with is you end up with a track that has more level audio. And again, if I wanted this louder, I would go ahead and I'd amplify it, but I want to have that dramatic effect of it increasing. So let's say we're going to do sleigh ride this time, and we want to do the same thing, right? But let's say that here we start off with sleigh ride, and we start off automatically. We start off with this. It starts off really loud. But let's say we want to gradually bring that in. So we can use the same process we used before. We can normalize it, we can equalize it, because we want to get it to a point where the entire track is leveled out. But let's say now we want to fade this in. So we would select this part here, because we know this is kind of what we really want to be. And let's say that that's the part we want to go ahead and fade in. So what we would do is we would take our effect and we can do a fade in effect. And now what we would end up having is the increased volume. And we can do the same thing again with the envelope tool. So we can go ahead and increase it there, we can decrease it. So there's different ways to go ahead and do that. It's just a matter of your taste and what you want, and where you're going ahead and you're changing the audio file itself. So when you save this, you're actually saving it as a project file. So let's say I wanted to save this the way that it was. I want to save the project, and now it's going to say, what do you want to save it as? And it's going to save it as an AUP file. So now anytime I can go back into that file, and make modifications. Make modifications to it. Now, let's say that, again, I want to only take a portion of that file. And before, what I showed you was when you cut it. Well, let's say I wanted to cut out this section, right? Because I don't want to hear this section. This is a part, it's a repeat. I don't want it. If I go ahead and cut it, if you remember what happened before, and I deleted it, well, it shifted everything over. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want to leave it where it was, or maybe I just want this section. There's another tool that's called the trim tool. And what the trim tool does is, rather than deleting the section that I've selected, the trim tool actually will delete everything but, and leave the file where it is. So if I select trim, now it's going to go ahead and just leave the portion of the audio file that I wanted to have in the first place. So again, if I have a long track, I can go ahead and I can just cut out that portion easily without trying to find where the start and end on either side was. So I can go ahead and trim it. I can cut out the audio like I showed you before. Noise removal, we'll get to noise removal in a second because I think that's something is more apparent in voice files. Splitting audio tracks. So I'm going to see if I put it in here. Let's see. There it is. Okay. So this is the full Nutcracker suite. And I certainly don't want to sequence the whole thing, right? I don't think anybody does. But let's say I wanted to sequence part of this. And you'll notice the red lines here. These are where we were talking about where we have clipping. So because of the way this audio file was created, there's clipping in this file. And that's where you start hearing the distortion in the speakers. But let's say I wanted a section of this file. And if you'll notice, it is it's pretty much the whole thing. I don't want the whole thing, right? So I just want the Sugar Plum Fairy part. So let's see. We can find that. Now I know it's there, right? How would I find that if I didn't know where that was? Before we get into that, let's try to say I want to use a seek function, right? So there's a couple of functions in here. There's autoplay, there's quick play. So what click play gives me the ability to do is go to any section on my waveform, and it'll start playing it where I am. So I can easily go through and say, okay, I think it's here. I think that's what I'm looking for, right? There's also what's called scrubbing. Now, with scrubbing, let me turn that off for a second. So with scrubbing, what you would do is go into transport, and you can scrub and you can seek, right? So scrubbing gives me the ability to have the music play in real time, and I can play it at different speeds. So let's stop that for a second. So before, when I did quick play, I can go to a point in time and I can start playing from that point, wherever my marker is, right? And it'll start playing it so I can find it. With the seek, oops. With the seek, what it gives me the ability to do, or the scrub, is I can actually move back and forth in the audio file to try to figure out what I'm looking for, and it's going to move forwards and backwards. I can change the speed with my mouse wheel. So if I'm looking for something in particular, that's a feature I can have. And then there's also a feature in here that's called, which is seek, but seek will actually go to where you are. So kind of like seek on a radio. So scrub will move the file from one point to another point at different speeds that you choose. And then, scrub will take you directly to there. So, or seek will take you directly to that point. So again, if you have a very big file and you're looking for a particular point in that file, it can be very helpful. I don't use those a whole lot, but again, you can see where there's some value in there. Now, remember what I said was I only want this part of the audio file. So I found it, I know where it is. So we're going to go back to here. Right? Because this is the part that I want, and I know it ends here. I know this section, if you could kind of hear that clipping. So let's get rid of that clipping, number one. So what I'm going to do is I know this is what I want. I'm going to go back in here like I had before. We're going to go ahead and normalize. And now what I've done is I've brought it down. It's lowered some of the other sections, which I can raise. And I could have just done that one section, but now what I've done is I've gotten below that clipping threshold. But I know this is the section that I want for that particular audio track. Now I can go ahead and again, do what I did before. And I can go ahead and I can trim it, so I can just trim that out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And again, we can select it. And you notice it kept it where it was. And now I can do a Control C and a Control V, and now I can create it on a separate track. So I'll copy and paste. Yeah, yes and no, Keith. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about modifying audio files. But what I've done now, and you'll notice that now I've created that separate track, and this is what I wanted. So I can take that out of there. But let's do something different. Let's say I want multiple parts, and this is called splitting the audio. I want multiple parts out of this particular audio track, but I don't want the whole thing, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create it. We're going to go ahead and we're going to create a label track. This is where it kind of gets interesting, because now what I can do is I can create a label track, and if I click on Control B, now what I can do is I can actually say this is fairy, right? And let's pick another part. And let's say I want this one. Same thing. I can do Control B, and I can call this, I don't know what this is. We're just going to call this track B, okay? And then I can do one more over here. Let's say I want this part of the file, Control B, and call this track C. Now, here's kind of one of the fun things you can do with Audacity. What do I do with this? Do I really want to trim each of these and save it? The answer is I don't have to, because what I can do is now I can go ahead and go up to File, and I can export, and I can export it as multiple, right? I could export it as one, but I can export as multiple. And it brings me up this nifty little screen here and says, do I want to split the files based on tracks or labels? Well, yeah, Giz automatically knows I have labels, so it's going to say, sure, split it up by labels, and it's going to use the label track name. And once I go ahead and I click export, okay, it's going to come up with the metadata if I want to go ahead and change the metadata in there. And I'm going to click OK. And it's going to do it for each one. And now what it's going to do is it's going to create a separate audio file for each one of those tracks. So when I go back down into, hopefully, where is that? Okay, I'm trying to see where it's, here's where it saved it. So if I was to go to this particular file, it's going to show me 4 different tracks, right? Because I actually had a blank one here, which is untitled. So what I now have is I have 4 separate MP3s. This one I would scrub, but I have 4 separate files now that I can use for creating 4 separate sequences or just having 4 separate audio files. So being able to do that, there's a lot of value, especially when you're dealing with single tracks that you want to go ahead and you want to break up. So I want to go ahead and stop there again and ask, are there any questions on that? Because there's a lot here. I know I'm going through it pretty fast. Okay. So we went through importing, opening, balancing, and flattening a file, cutting audio, trimming an audio, splitting an audio, noise removal, saving to MP3. Again, remember when I said where you needed to have the lame extension. And again, most of you have done that. We've even split audio tracks. We'll get into change audio pitch and tempo. That's kind of the question Keith had. But when you save these automatically, when you go ahead and you make modifications, and normally what I'll do with audio files is when I download them from Amazon or iTunes or from a CD, I want to go ahead and clean them up. And that's why I go through this process. So I'll normally go through a cleansing process of cleaning up the file. I'll cut off the dead silence, and I'll go ahead and resave it. So now let's say that I have this audio file, and but I want to save this file as it is. I've made some changes. We're going to go ahead and we're going to normalize this so that I can get that clipping out of there, right? Because that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to clean the file up. Now I've gone ahead and I've cleaned the file up, and I want to save this file. So what I would do is just go into here and export, and I can export it in multiple different file types. Again, having those extensions gives me the opportunity to do that. So having the lame extension, the FFmpeg extension, it gives me the opportunity to do that. But I want to save it either as an MP3 or a WAV file, or as an OGG, which is an open source audio file. You notice I don't have the opportunity to save it as a WMA file. I cannot save, nor can I import a WMA file natively into Audacity. So if you have a WMA file, you need to convert it, and then you can go ahead and bring it into Audacity. But I can export just the labels. I can just export a particular section of audio. So let's say that I didn't use the tool I did before. I can select this section and I can just export that section of the audio. But let's say I want to just export this whole thing as an MP3. Again, for our purposes, we want to go ahead and we want to export it as a 192-bit. That's pretty standard, and as a constant bit rate. I think most audio now is a constant bit rate, but you always want to make sure you have a CBR. Yes, xLights will adjust for that. But again, I'm old school. I like to go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do that myself. So that's kind of the basics with an audio file, of going through and making those discrete changes. So again, if you have, we'll go through here. You know, again, one more time, the sleigh ride is a great example. If I wanted to go ahead and make some changes to this. Now, the question here was, let's say that I want to tweak it to make it less likely that YouTube copyright snooper will flag it. Let's just say that I want to go ahead and change it because I want to increase or decrease the speed of the file. Right? So we're going to go ahead and just play this section here. Oops, sorry. And let's say that's the section that we want to go ahead and change. So I can go up to Effect, and there's a change speed and a change pitch option. Again, I can go ahead and change the pitch. Let's say I wanted to change the whole thing, right? But I'm just going to do this section so it doesn't take so long. If I go into the effect and I'll go ahead and I'll do change pitch, I can go ahead and change it up, change it down. Let's go ahead and change it up a little bit. We're just going to go ahead and go into a half step on a semitone and change it up. Or change it down, sorry. But you notice now I increased clipping. Or I added clipping in there. So what I did was I can change the tone, I can change the pitch, and I can change the speed. So you can do that with any audio file. You can do it across the whole board, or you can do it in different sections. Okay, so the question is, what is the highest bit rate that we can export? And it's 320 kilobits per second. That's what Audacity allows us right now. 192 is suitable for the most part for us, but again, you know, there's a lot of flexibility in here to do what you need to do. There's so many different effects. If you were to plug in all the different effects, I mean, you just go ahead as you download it and go ahead and play with it. There's a lot of things. I'll use low pass filters. I'll use limiters, high pass filters, which is really, you're looking at your bass and your highs and your lows, and you're only filtering out certain sounds, right? Certain tones. You can add a delay. You can do crossfade. So I'll show you really quick if I want to do a crossfade. So let's say that now I want to go from one track to another. I'm going to import, we'll go from Sleigh Ride and we'll go to Welcome Christmas. So I'm going to import this. This is where we kind of get into some of the cool features of what we want to do. So you'll notice now if I was to play this, they would both play together and that would be unruly. We don't really want that, right? Right? So now what I want to do is I want to go from one to the other. And so I want to start with Sleigh Ride because maybe I'm going and I'm creating a mashup, and this gets into the different types of things that I want to do. And I want to go ahead and I want to create this mashup from Sleigh Ride into Welcome Christmas. So how would I do that? Well, I know that the beginning of Sleigh Ride ends somewhere around here. So let's go ahead and let's find it. So, and I know it's here, right? This is where I want to be. So I can do one of two things. I can cut off this whole part of it here and just keep this and then fade into this one, right? Because I'm not going to use the rest of this. I only want to have this section of it. So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to leave a little bit more, and I'll show you why. I'm going to go ahead, and I'm just going to cut this. So I'm going to select it up here, and I'm going to just delete it. So now what I want to do is I want to fade from this to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of eye it, and you notice these two tracks are moving together. Why is that? I selected the tool. Why are they doing that? The reason they're doing that is I've got sync lock tracks turned on, right? So that's important, especially when you have multiple tracks and you're trying to move things around. You don't want to lose that continuity. So I'm going to turn that off. And now you notice I can move this bottom track just by dragging it, right? But what I want to do is I want it to fade into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a crossfade, right? There's different ways to do this. You can fade out on one, fade into the other. But I want to do a crossfade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this section here. I'm going to go to my effect, and I'm going to do a crossfade. Empty space to start into the selection. Okay. So it didn't like that. I don't know why it didn't like that. Oh, I know why. There. Let's try that again. Oh, well, one track. Okay. So let's do this. Let's copy this up here. All right. So we'll do that again. So the crossfade, yeah, the crossfade is only on one track. Sorry. So I'm going to move this here, and then we'll go ahead and select the crossfade. Oh, crossfade tracks, that's why. If I did it there. So we'll crossfade the clips, and now what it's going to do is it's going to go from one to the other. I'm going to boot this. And you'll notice that's exactly what it did. It crossfade from one to the other. And it does give you both of them. I selected the wrong one. You have crossfade track and crossfade clips. So the tracks would give me the ability to crossfade it on the multiple tracks, which is typically what I use anyway. Just clicked on the wrong one. So you have that ability there. Let's see what else. Mashups are the same thing. You can add them on multiple lines or multiple tracks. So you can have as many audio tracks as you want. And then you can go ahead and fade them one into the other. You can automatically go from one to the other, again, using just these tools up here, and then a couple of these basic effects. The fade in, the fade out, the EQ. There's some others in here we can kind of talk through. And I don't know how much time we have. I'd like to go into the next section. It's about 10 to 9. Can we?
Sure, you have the time.
Okay. So from an audio perspective, is there anything else on the audio files that anybody wants to see? Don't be shy. All right. So again, and you notice here I muted this because what I did here was I had the second track. I didn't want to hear it, so I just went ahead and I went ahead and just muted it. Some of the other things you can do is down here on the time, you can go ahead and you can select where you want to be at a point in time. You can change the way your time looks. So if you want to go to, different formats, you can snap to a time. So again, there's a lot of flexibility, especially when you're dealing with multiple files. But this is primarily kind of the basics that you'll be doing. Most folks are going to use these type of effects and elements within Audacity. Let's talk about a rhythm track. So somebody had asked me, one of the questions was, how do you create a rhythm track, a beat track? Well, what we do is we would go into tracks. We can add new, generate, sorry. So we go into generate, and it's a rhythm track, right? It used to be called a click track. Now it's a rhythm track. And the rhythm track gives us the ability to generate beats per minute. So 120 beats per minute, 4 beats per measure. number of measures. So we could do 16. We can do a 32 bar beat track. If we wanted to start at a particular time, if we wanted to end at a particular time. There's different sounds in here. So if you'll notice on the metronome, on that downbeat, it gives you a higher pitch. You can have a ping. Cowbell's a new one. That's interesting. Okay. And noise click and a drip, right? But again, we're just going to do the metronome, hit OK. And now what I have is I have myself a nice little beat track. If I want to extend that, I can copy and paste it. The other thing that I can do is I can create, just like in xLights and Papagayo, I can go in here and I can actually create a beat track, right? So off of this, I can create another label track, a time track. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do this. But now, if you'll notice, when I go in here, now I have somewhere I can go. And so what I want to do here, let's see if this will work. Okay, and now here I can analyze this. And does this look familiar? Under Analyze, same things we see. These are the Queen Mary Vamp plugins. Same thing we see in xLights. So now I can create, my beat and bar track. I can do a beat finder. Okay. So we're going to select this, and we are going to find the beats. And here they are. So now I can create this here, and you'll notice now that I have this beat track, or that's what I was looking for. So when I have this label track that it creates these beats, now I can go ahead and it'll give me the line. So if I'm trying to line up my beats, now I can go ahead and do that. So a lot of different ways to be able to get granular with your audio files. All right. So from an audio perspective, that's kind of the key things. There's not really, you can change the speed. So if you're playback, let's say you're doing playback, this is another play button if you want to. It's another way to seek through a file. Welcome Christmas, you can change. So again, it's another way to go through an audio file. How do I make my Mickey Mouse voiceover better? Well, that's one of those things where you can, right? And so we're going to talk about voiceovers and how you can modify your voice. Some of it's an art. I know we have some very talented voiceover professionals in our midst who do great work. But part of why I wanted to talk about the voiceover piece was so that you can do your own. So if you want to do a basic voiceover, you can do that. That's what I wanted to cover next. So bear with me on that. I don't do a very good Mickey Mouse, but we'll certainly try. So Ed asked, how do these label tracks import into xLights? Simply, you can export the track and then you can import it. I know Tom Langley had done, I guess about a year or two ago, had done on creating those labels back when it wasn't so easy for doing lyric tracks. But it's the same thing. So I can actually take this track and I can export. I can export the labels. So I'm going to export this label track as a text file. And then when I go into xLights, I could just go ahead and import it as a track within xLights. So it's really that simple. And what it creates, let's see, I'm not sure where it's saved it because I don't have my preference. I didn't set my preferences because I'm just so used to doing it, and I'm working in a different folder right now. But it would go ahead and save it, and then you could just go ahead and import that. All right, there's really not, again, on this, not a whole lot else. Go ahead and play around with it. I mean, if you're in there, you really can't break anything, but there's a lot of things you can do in here. You can split sections too. So let's talk about that real quick, and then we'll get into the voice side. So let's say before, remember I was talking about before where I had two different audio files, and I wanted to split the track because I wanted to insert another audio file in there, right? So let's say this is where I wanted to split it. So what I can do is, let's see if this will work. Okay, I can do a Control-I, right? That's what I did. You can also go up to, let's see, I think it was one of these, maybe it was here, but I can do a Control-I, and then if I go back into my transport tool, now I can go ahead and take that section I just split and I can move it. So what's the value of that? Let's say I had another audio file. Let me get rid of this. Okay, so now I got two audio tracks, right? Now let's say here I wanted to insert an audio file, or I wanted to overlay it here, because I can have multiple tracks, and when I save this as one file, it will go ahead and it will render down into one audio file. But let's say that I wanted to just have this section play here. I can, again, go back here. I can do my, I can remember what we did before. Let's say this is the only section I want out of all of that to insert into here. Maybe it's some kind of an audio file I picked up, or a voice file from a commercial or something. All I've got to do is go ahead and trim it. And now this will go ahead and fit in there nicely. I can either move it up there, or I can just go ahead and save it down, and it'll render as one audio file. And some of the other things I can do here, let's say that I want to just, I don't want to remove anything, I just want to silence it. I can use this one here, and now it's quiet. We'll go through that on the voice side. Okay, yep, audio to create voice tracks. Sure, certainly you can do labels. Sometimes it is easier, and the reason it is you've got a bigger canvas to work with. So you can, if depending on what size screen you're on, you can actually create those label tracks, and then you can import those. So in some cases it is easier to do that for xLights. Yeah, so WavePad is similar to Audacity. You can break it out. Yes, I don't know if you can break it up by time into equal sizes. I've never done that. So it's something you probably can do, but honestly, I don't know how you would do it now. But you know, it's something to look into. That's certainly a good idea. Don't know why I'd want to do that, but I'm sure there's cases where I'd want to break up an audio file into you know, different segments, like you're saying, in 20-second segments. All right, so let's go back to here for a second. And we kind of went through all of these. Oh, multi-track, that was the last one. So somebody asked about multi-track. Can you do not just stereo, but multi-track? So in a professional studio, we've got mixers, we've got a lot more heavy-duty equipment where you could have, 8, 16, 24, 32 plus tracks. Yes, you can. And the way you would do that is, depending on the hardware you have, that's where it gives you the ability to actually set those up. So let's say that I had a recording device. Let's see, I had a recording device, and let's say here, that recording device had 8 channels. When I went down to here, it would give me the opportunity to load all 8 of those channels, or 16 or 32 or whatever, because it would identify that piece of equipment. So it's dependent on the device. So if I'm using a mixer and that mixer's got 32 channels, it's going to give me the ability to select up to 32 channels. When I go ahead and I record, which we'll talk through on the voice side, it will automatically load all of those channels. So the capability is definitely there. Again, We're not talking about a piece of software that costs hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars, but it does pretty much the same thing with a little extra effort. So I think there's a lot of capability here, and for most of us, it's got everything we need. And again, the preferences give you a lot of opportunity to change, like most things. Your shortcuts are even here. So if you look in your keyboard and mouse, it'll give you what your shortcuts are. By the way, there's a very good help. There's a good wiki on Audacity. They keep it up. The help is you can go out to YouTube. You can go out and search. There's just a ton of information on Audacity and what people have used it for. So we've kind of gone through that. Now let's talk about voiceovers for a second. Let's talk about doing voice. No real difference from an audio perspective. Audacity doesn't care. One of the things I'll recommend, there's a myriad of different pieces of hardware out there. There's microphones, there's headphones. From a microphone perspective, let's talk through this. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars, first of all, right? But you do want to have a good quality microphone. So like I said, I've got my webcam mic. I don't even use that. I bought a Blue Yeti. I bought it online. It was on sale, $80, right? Normally they go for $100, $120, something like that, $140 depending. And you can get different types. Nobody cares about the color, but don't get the blue, or it's called the Snowball. It's okay. But if you're going to do kind of semi-professional, you want to at least go with that. Now, in the studios, they're going to be using the XLR mics. And even those range anywhere. There's different mics. I mean, you can get a Hale mic, which is about $400. You can get a Newman mic, which is $1,300. So it just all depends on, what you can afford. But I find that the Blue Yeti works great for what I need it. And it's a USB mic, works very well. There's a lot of features on it that I don't even use, right? Headphones, you definitely want good headphones when you're working with audio. Wired headphones. Don't you get wireless. Don't use Bluetooth. Good wired headphones. Now, again, there's personal choices. I've got an Audio-Technica M40X. They're great. They're over the ear. They're what they call a closed headphone. They're very comfortable. I'm on the computer all day long, and they get a little warm, but other than that, they're perfect. The sound out of them is clear and they're crisp. Again, you can get them anywhere on sale from $80 to $100, $120. The ones I would recommend if you really want to go out, and this is my choice, is there's Bear Dynamics. It's a DT770 Pro. They run about $140. Great over-the-ear headphones. You won't be disappointed. But again, I bought these, and they work well for me. Try to be in a room that's as quiet as possible. You'll notice even with my mic here, there may be some echo in the room. So sometimes when the mic is so sensitive, it picks up birds outside or a dog barking or something. So you want to make sure that you're in as quiet a room as possible. Voice enhancement application. I use a tool called Voice Meter, and that's a whole different subject. Voice Meter is great because it really enhances the quality of your audio. It's kind of like a preamp, right? So before you're going into Audacity, you can go ahead and use that, and it really can clean up your voice. It's a great tool. If we have time, I'll kind of walk through it a little bit, but it's free, or it's donationware. It really is pay for use, but it's like $20 or something like that, $10. Great tool. Your setup's probably the most important. We'll talk about, again, we talked about doing a mic check and where we should be from a microphone perspective. your inputs, your outputs, etc. That's where the power of doing a lot of the effects within xLights really comes to fruition. Yes, the Baird dynamics, there are several of them, as Tom points out. Yeah, the 32 ohm, the 80 ohm is probably what you want to get. I don't know, Tom, which do you think, the 32 or the 80? The 80, okay. And they're not that expensive, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, if you go out there and look, they're not that expensive for a good quality headphone. It's definitely worth it, because what you're going to find is you're going to have these things sitting on your ears, and you're going to use them more and more. Now, when I'm doing even sequences, and I'm doing the audio tracks for sequences, I'll use headphones. I can't hear through the speakers very well, and you definitely want a comfortable pair of headphones that do your research on them. There's open back, closed back, pros and cons of each. Go out and look and see what some of the professional, just go on YouTube and look at some of the podcasters and look at some of the audio files, and ask folks like Tom and some other folks to say, what do you use on a daily basis? You don't have to spend thousands of dollars, but you definitely want to have quality equipment. Again, for doing voiceovers, always use a script. Always have that script, practice it a few times, adjust your mic, record it in mono. There's really no need to record in stereo, and there's some benefits of not doing that. Again, using the voice enhancement, you can add background audio, some of the ways we showed you, and WAV is certainly acceptable if you're doing voiceovers, a WAV file. Save it as an MP3. There's pros and cons to each. We'll talk about doing some voice editing. And again, these are just the way I learned how to do it. This is how I do it. There's no right or wrong in this. Okay, so let's kind of go into the voice file. And again, this is kind of where I'm certainly not an expert. I've done some for myself. I've done some for other folks. So we're going to head and close this out. Actually, what I'm going to do is, it looks like I've got several versions of Audacity running. That's kind of the interesting thing. It actually saves different sessions, and we certainly don't want to blow anything up here. Okay, so let's go back into Audacity. And we're going to create a voiceover. Now, one of the things you want to do is I can create a new project, but I don't have to. I can automatically start, right? So I don't have a script in front of me right now, so I'm going to be doing this ad hoc. But one of the things you want to do is make sure on your microphone, and there's different types of mics, some you talk in the top, some you talk on the side, you want your gain turned all the way down, and you want to be as close to the mic as possible so that you don't pick up the outside noise. All it's picking up is your voice. You want to get a pop filter because you get the P's and the B's. You want to get a pop filter. If you don't have a pop filter, put a sock on it. Seriously, take a sock, get a wool sock, put it over the microphone. It works in a pinch, but pop filters are cheap. Wind filters too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead here, and we're going to, like I said, I'm going to ad hoc this. So let me all right. So we're going to go ahead and do this. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights, your lighting show spectacular. Our light show runs from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 6 p.m. to midnight on the weekends. We hope you enjoy our show. Now sit back, relax, and Merry Christmas. All right, so what I've done is I've recorded that, and you notice one of the things that I've done here, first of all, is there's dead space here. Why is that there? And I'll show you why that's important in a second. Next thing you'll know here, there's clipping. Why is there clipping? Well, it was loud. I didn't adjust my mic accordingly, and so what happened was it definitely was clipping. So, and then the third thing is I made a mistake. I actually did that on purpose, so I can show you again how you can kind of clean up a file. When you're doing voice, having that script is important, but if you make a mistake, just keep on going, because Audacity gives you the ability to edit the file, right? So let's go ahead and play that back a little bit, see what it sounds like. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights, your lighting show spectacular. All right, so you'll notice there that it's very raw. I'm not using a preprocessor right now. It's basically through my microphone. So the first thing you notice here is there's noise, there's background noise, there's some popping, there's lip smacking. I'm going to turn that up a little bit so you can hear it. Okay. I don't want that in my audio. So let's say that I did want to keep this. I was going to keep this whole track because it came out perfect. First thing I want to do is I want to get rid of that, because now that I know there's a pattern here, you notice there's those breath sounds. Everybody has unique sounds, lip smacking, breath sounds, background noise. We're going to go ahead and remove that. But first thing I want to do is I'm going to normalize this file, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to select this. And I'm just going to go back into my effect. I'm going to normalize it. Again, I'm going to leave it at my -1 dB. And that should get rid of. Now I've gotten rid of my clipping. So now I can kind of work with this, right? Next thing I want to do is I want to get rid of that noise throughout the track. And I know I made a mistake here, but I'll deal with that in a second. First thing I want to do is I want to isolate that background noise. That up a little bit. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this noise removal tool. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select that area. I'm going to go into my effect and I'm going to select noise reduction, right? I'm going to get the noise profile. I'm going to filter out that noise. So what it's going to do is Audacity now takes all of that into account, and now it knows what that noise sounds like. Now I want to select the entire track, go into effect. I'm going to go back into normalize, and you notice, or excuse me, I'm going to go back into noise reduction. And now I'm going to use the bottom part. Well, you notice it sets it at 12 dB, sensitivity of 6. These are standards. I want to preview it and see if it removed it. I can still see a little bit, but let's see what it did. So it got rid of that click, but it still has the breath sound. So what I can do is a couple things. I can go ahead and increase this a little bit. One of the things you're going to learn, though, is as you change the voice profile, you're also going to affect the sound quality. So this is more of an art than it is a science. So the breath is still there. Here's what I'm going to do, though. I don't like to play with this. I'm just going to hit OK. I'm going to let it remove it. Now let's listen to it. Okay, so now I've got that breath in there. So what I want to do is I'm going to repeat that noise reduction. You notice it's a little quieter. Let's see if I've... Hi, and... All right, let's turn it down now. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights. Okay, so still has the breath in there, but I can deal with that. Hi, because you notice it's not really pronounced now. So what I'm going to do now is now I can get rid of this. So again, I'm going to go into here and I'm just going to delete it. Hi. Now this is the part that I screwed up on. So I can go ahead and delete that too. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights, your lighting show spectacular. Our light show runs from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Friday and 6 p.m. to midnight on the weekends. We hope... Now there's a breath sound there. Now, I don't necessarily want it to sound fake because there's a couple ways I can manage this, right? So again, with that breath sound in there, breath sounds are normal, but when you're doing professional voiceovers, you're doing professional audio work, you really don't want them in there, right? So let's listen to that one more time. So there's a... So now what I can do is, let's see, I think this is lights. Let's say weekends. Okay, so what I can do here is rather than redoing the noise profile, all I got to do is silence it, right? Now listen. Begins. We hope you enjoy our show. So now what I've done is I went ahead and I've just silenced that part of the audio. I don't have to go ahead and do anything else with it. But let's say I don't like the space there. Let's say it's too long. Begins. It's too much of a, so what I can do is I can go ahead, select it, I can cut it out. And now begins. We hope you enjoy our show. Now sit back, relax, and Merry Christmas. Now this is what I was talking about before with trimming. Same thing with an audio file. I've got this dead space here. I don't need it. So Christmas. I can go into here and I can cut it out. Now I've got something to work with. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to stretch this out. Okay. Because now I've got my whole wave file here. So now this gives me the basis to work with, right? This is a raw file. It's not Mickey Mouse. It's a raw file. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights, your lighting show spectacular. Our light show runs from 6 p.m. to... So now I have something that really starts to sound like something I want to use in my show, right? So now what I'm going to do is, now that I've gone ahead and I've got this high here, so I want to bring that down. I want to bring this down just a little bit. So now I'm going to go into my effect. I'm going to go to amplify, and I'm going to bring it down maybe a little bit there. Okay. Now we'll try that again. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas. So it's still a little loud, so we can go ahead and bring it down a little more. And we can look at our other amplification too, right? So we can kind of match it up here. And that's where a normalize can come in. You can kind of use your normalize. And maybe I want that dramatic effect there. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Light. That's a little bit better, right? So now what I'll do is I'll go back through. And we'll go back through, and now we're going to normalize the entire audio file. And you notice it didn't make much change, but it's very subtle. Now it's kind of trebly. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Light. So what we're going to do now is we're going to apply some EQ to it. So we'll go back to our equalizer. Okay. And what I want to do is we're going to add some bass, add some treble, right? Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights. So what I want to do is I want to increase that bass just a little bit. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights. And we'll take away some of the treble here. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights. Okay, so now it's not as trebly, right? Your lighting show spectacular. So it's a little more normal, right? Now I can add bass. So if I want to add, let's say I wanted to add bass to the track, I can go in here and there's actually a bass and treble effect. So I can actually add more bass if I wanted to do that. You know? Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights. So your lighting shows. So what that does is that gives me the ability to. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas. So now, you notice I have clipping again. Why? Because I went ahead and I just increased that bass. So now all I have to do is go back in here and normalize again. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights. Okay, so now you've seen we've gone from a raw file to something that it sounds good, right? It sounds better. And again, we're doing this on the fly. But again, it's an art form. Lights. Your lighting show spectacular. So what do I want to do now? Now that I've gone ahead and done that, there's also an effect called a compressor. And a compressor, go into here with the compressor effect. And I want to show this one because this is one that I didn't like it at first when I started using it, and then it started becoming a very useful tool. So what it does is it really kind of balances out the sound, right? Unlike an equalizer where you're managing all your different frequencies, right? With the compressor, you're really kind of leveling out or determining how much you're going to reduce those highs and those lows by. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and apply a compressor effect to this. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to turn this down a little bit. We're going to take the threshold down just a tad. We're going to drop the noise floor a little bit. Ratio 5:1 is fine. You can leave that. Your attack time and release time, have it all the way to the end. Let's see what this sounds like. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights, your lighting show spectacular. Now it actually sounds like you're in a studio, right? And again, every time you do this, you notice the waveform changes. You can massage a file too much, right? So you can make a lot of extra changes, and sometimes that's not a good thing either. So now what we have is we have a file. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights. So what we're going to do is, now that we've done the compressor, we're going to normalize one more time. And the reason we want to do that is we want to make sure we get everything into that right sweet spot. Your lighting show spectacular. Our light show runs from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Now what you have is you've got a file that you can use. Now, what do I do with that? I'm going to go ahead and save this project file for a second. Okay. So we're just going to call this intro. Right? So now I have that. Well, it's kind of boring just having the sound file, but that's the basics. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more art, a lot more you can do when you're creating voiceovers. Again, this is one of those things where over time, and when you do it in the right facility and you have a script and you've gone over it, it becomes a lot easier and a lot more natural. Now, let's say we want to add music to the background of this. This is where your voiceover now becomes a little bit more than it is. So I'm going to import an audio file. And let's use our sleigh ride, right? Because I like sleigh ride. Now you notice that this file is much shorter than sleigh ride. That's okay, right? So, and obviously we've only done a very short segment here, but we can make that work, right? So what I'm going to do is, first thing I want to do is I want a music intro. So I'm going to take my time traveler selection here, and I'm just going to move it out of the way. And so now what I want is I want my introduction to start with the music. Okay, so we're going to start there, and we're going to kind of make something happen here. Okay. And I'm going to go right up to that one part. And now what I'm going to do is, this is where I want my audio track to start. So we're going to line it up there. And remember what we talked about, if you want to use the beat tracks and line it up. So but I'm going to just play it from here, and let's see what we end up with. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights, your lighting show spectacular. Now that's good, right? I mean, but the music itself is still a little bit loud. Now, how do I want to manage that? There's a couple of ways I can do it. I can do a fade in, fade out, or I can use what's called an auto duck. Now, some professionals, they don't like auto duck. What auto duck does is you select your voice and your music, and again, it's down and dirty. Okay, so we have to actually move this down here. And let's try this. Below select the track. I don't know why it's doing that. So auto duck usually works. I don't know why it's not working now. Technology. But what'll happen is that I can go ahead and when I select this, let's see. Yeah. So what it'll do is it'll automatically decrease the audio or the music file and then increase it. But what I can do here without using auto duck is I can actually do a fade out. I can do a fade out, level it out, and fade it in. I'm just trying to figure out, the auto duck should work. I don't know why it's not. And it could be, I just upgraded it. So, and what it's telling me is it needs a control track replaced before the select track. So I don't know why it's doing that. But normally what you can do is you can use auto duck, it'll decrease it. But we have our other option here, and we're going to go ahead and use our envelope tool. So what we'll do is we'll take that. We want to do that here. So we'll kind of bring it down here. We'll bring this back up. Now let's try that and see what that sounds like. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights, your lighting show spectacular. Our light show runs from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Friday and 6 p.m. to midnight on the weekends. We hope you enjoy our show. Now sit back, relax, and Merry Christmas. And now what I can do here is I can do a fade out, right? And if I wanted to fade out more, I can repeat it and repeat it. And then what happens is at the end of that, and you can make it more pronounced, right? I mean, it depends on how long you want it, right? And you can Control R will repeat it. And eventually what'll happen is you'll end up with this. And it fades to silence. And then what you can do is you can go ahead and cut off the rest of that. And now what you have is you basically have a voiceover that you've created for your show. And now when you save this, you would just go ahead and export it. I mean, you can go ahead and you can normalize it again, but if you're happy with it, go ahead and export it. We'll call this intro. It tells me it's going to mix it down to a stereo track. And that should be it. Let me see, where did it save that? I think it saved it as... let's see, where did it save that file as? Audio, okay. So if I go back to, bear with me a second. There. And now I have my intro file. So when I go ahead and I play my intro file, this is what I get. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights, your lighting show spectacular. And that's it. That's what it takes to create a voice track and an audio track. And there's more you can do with it. So what I did, I've done several of these. And again, it takes a little bit longer than what we've done here. But there's different ways to do it. So if one method doesn't work for you, there's other methods to work. Again, the auto duck, I've used it. It's not perfect. This is a good way to be able to do that because you really want that music in the background. Now let's do something different because somebody asked about Mickey Mouse, and I want to show you some of the other things really quick that you can do with it. So we're going to go ahead and go back to our voice here for a second, and we're going to play the voice. Welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights, your lighting show spectacular. Now let's say I wanted this to sound like an elf, right? I don't do very good voice impressions. However, I can do it with Audacity. I can do it one of a couple ways. I can take that same lyric track, that same audio file, I can increase the speed. So let's increase it. Now what I can do is I can do it using the slider. I can do it changing it from a 33 to a 45. Let's do that. Let's change it. And we're going to change it to a 45. Let's change it to a 45 and see what that sounds like.
Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights, your lighting show spectacular.
Just like that, you've now created an elf. You can also change the tempo without changing the pitch. So let's say that I want to speed up the original, but I don't want to change the pitch. Let's try that. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights. Let's say I want to slow it down. Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights. So you don't necessarily have to re-record everything. If you want to get different effects, you can do that. If you want to get, so here's what we've done, right? Monday through Friday. Now you notice it slowed it down. Now let's say you want to get, I want to make this for Halloween and I don't want to re-record it, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to change the pitch. We're going to go way down here. Right?
Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights.
Now what I can do is I can also change the speed, which would also change the pitch. So,
Hi, and welcome to
oops. Oops.
Hi, and welcome to Imagine Christmas Lights.
So you can do all kinds of different voice things with it. Obviously, it's not perfect, and you want to get as close to it as possible. So if you were going to do, say, something for Halloween, if you're going to do a demonic voice, you'd want to go ahead and start with something like this. Give it a good baseline. But for, doing something like an elf or something like that, just increasing the speed, increasing the pitch might just get you what you want. So you can use that same script without having to talk in that high pitch and be able to increase it such that you can get that same effect. So we have a question. Quality can it be raised? Quantity, can it be raised? Quantity of what? You can unmute. I think we can unmute.
The quality of when you save the file, you saved it at 192. Can you raise it to get more stereo in it with a higher bit rate?
You can save it up to a 320 kilobit. Now I don't know what that's going to get you. Again, you can certainly try it. If you were going to be doing, again, that would be where you would be. Now I don't know what it's going to benefit you, but you can certainly try the different options and see. Obviously, there's a lot of pros and cons to increasing it. Again, for what we do for our hobby, the 192 seems to be more than enough of what we need. And again, if I was doing this as an actual voiceover, I would go ahead and I would record it in mono. I wouldn't even record it in stereo for several reasons. So one of the last questions I had, I mean, I know that didn't really answer your question, but that's really what you can do with it, right? I mean, you probably could do something with another type of tool, but that's what Audacity gives you. So one of the last questions somebody had, and this is kind of an interesting, can you do this? The question was, can you remove vocals from an audio track? The answer is sort of, okay? And I think let's open up an audio file that, I don't know if this one's gonna work. And that one's probably not gonna work. But let me go to, here, we'll do this. Let's go to here. And there we go. Oh, well, go to my audio file. And let's pick up, here's Linus. Okay, so this is one that I did, and it's a modification. Other people have done the same one. I went ahead and did this one. So we're gonna go ahead and try it.
Is there anyone who knows what Christmas
Everybody
is all
knows this one,
about?
right?
And there were in the same country shepherds, abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night.
Okay, so let's say we wanted to remove that vocal, all right? And this was a question somebody asked, so I'm going to try to walk through it as best I can. The answer is sometimes. Okay, part of the problem, even though maybe some folks have been successful, part of the problem is, in a perfect world, if your audio track, your lyric track was recorded in mono, typically it's going to be kind of in that center section, right? So you're going to kind of be in the center of that audio track. A lot of times with commercial recordings, you're recording it in stereo. You've got some reverb, you've got some other things going on. It's going to be in both tracks. And so the answer is sort of, right? But let's try that. Let's take this section. I'm going to go ahead and take this, and we're going to go ahead and try this. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to take this stereo track, and I'm going to, let's see, I am going to do a, where was that? It was tracks. Where was that? I know it's trying to find it. So what I want to do is I want to split the track, and there it is. No, that wasn't it. Let's see. Bear with me here 1 second. I know it's here. And there is a I can't find it right now. I don't know why I can't find. Oh, here. Wait, maybe it's right here. Hang on. There it is. Split stereo to mono. I was looking for the wrong place. All right. So now what I've done is I've created 2 mono tracks. Right. I've taken that stereo track and I've broken it down into 2 equal mono tracks. And you've noticed that now it's kind of leveled out. You don't have a left and right anymore. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this track and I am going to use an effect called invert. And now I've inverted this track. Okay. And let's see what happens. Let's see if we've gotten rid of that.
The angel of the Lord, the glory of the Lord.
So you notice some of it's still there. And so part of the challenge is, again, we can get rid of some of it, but because of the way the tracks are recorded, most cases, you're never going to get rid of all of it. You might be able to do some kind of slicing and dicing on them. Some audio tracks are going to work better than others. And I think it's probably not worth it, to be honest. But that's pretty much what you would do is if you want to go ahead and remove, because what it does is when you split that and you invert it, it basically turns around and cancels out that center track, right? Now, there is another way to do it. So we'll go back in here and we'll go back to our original file, right?
Sure, Charlie Brown. I can tell you what Christmas is all about. Lights, please.
There is an effect called voice reduction and isolation and voice remover, right? So, oops, I don't think it, let's close this out. And we'll go back in there. So now we're going to try that. So that was one way. The other effect is we're going to do a vocal remover. You notice it kind of gives you several options in here, how to do it. We're just going to go ahead and use the normal. So you kind of still hear a little bit of noise in the background, but it's not as prevalent, right? So maybe since we know, that there's audio here, what we could do is we could take this just like we did before. We can take our noise reduction effect. We can get the noise profile. We can select the entire track. We can go back into our noise reduction. But you still kind of hear it, right? So you'd have to kind of play with it and try to filter it out. But in most cases, I mean, it's probably more effort than it's worth. But
Carl,
yeah. Carl,
2 years ago, there's a video that I posted of a guy that was demonstrating exactly how to do this. You may post a link to it.
Yeah, you can. I mean, it's again, anybody who tells you they're going to get rid of all of the audio, this is the way that I know how to do it. You either do it the manual way or you use the new effects that they've put in there. There's also this voice reduction and isolation. But at the end of the day, you're not going to get rid of all of it, right? Again, just because of the nature of how sound works and how that voice track is embedded into that audio track. If it was done as a single, mono track and there was no, funny stuff going on, you probably could do a better job. I think this was pretty good, though. I think this one, and this is actually the mix that I put together. So it probably worked a little better than some of them will. But I hope, the whole purpose of this is that I hope everybody kind of got a sense of what you can do with it besides going out. You can certainly go out and buy Adobe. You can get the suite. It's all web-based now, and I think you can get it for, I don't know, the whole suite's like $50 a month or something like that, or you can buy the individual products. But I think that if you're going to do professional podcasts or voiceovers or things of that nature, you may want to, and you're doing it for profit, you probably want to go ahead and invest in something like the Adobe product, because it's going to give you, it's a little easier, it's a little more intuitive. Can you do the same things with Audacity? As you see, you can do pretty much 80%, probably a little bit more, with a little bit of effort. And they keep adding, more capabilities to it. And the powers in the effects, if you add the other plugins, you've got a lot more effects that you can do. Like I said, these filters, phaser, you can stretch. You can actually stretch an audio section. So if I've got this here, let's say I want to stretch that, I can go in here and I can collect this Paul stretch, and I can say, how much do I want to stretch it? What's the time resolution? I want to stretch it by a factor of 2. So I can stretch that file out. There's some other cool effects in here, but again, you're probably going to end up using, a handful of them. You can do, you can use what's called chains, and chains in Audacity are very effective. So like here, there's a chain for converting to an MP3. And so it's simple, is you normalize the file. This is what I was talking about before, is I'll bring the file in, whatever kind of file, usually if it's coming from Amazon or from iTunes, I'll convert it to an MP3, and then I'll bring it in here. I'll normalize it, and I'll export it, and it's done. But it's basically a macro, right? Because when you go in here, it gives you the ability to select what you want and then edit the parameters for each one of these. So when I select the normalize command, it gives me all of the parameters for that. So it's pretty powerful if you're doing the same repetitive tasks. So if you're doing voiceovers and you found that sweet spot for your voice of normalization, equalization, compressor, and normalize, create the audio track, get rid of the noise, click that change button, and it'll do all of that work for you, and you don't have to manually go through this process. So I hope this helps. Again, like I said, I bow to the professionals who do this for a living, because there's a lot more to this. But I think for most of us, what would be so cool if you created your own voiceover, or you created your own audio track, your own mashup, and it's yours. Now, the last thing I want to close with is, I know that the developers have added capability for Reaper and for another. So in other words, if I was to share my edited audio or my edited sequence, so let's say I took a sequence and I rendered it down from a 5-minute sequence to a 3-minute sequence using some of the tools that I've done here, right? I can share that today. I can share that sequence file, but I would have to either give you the audio file or give you the AUP file, my project file, and then you would render that through Audacity and create your own file. Now that they've added the capability to xLights, at least for Reaper, and there's one other audio tool to actually do that with just having that AUP file or having that project file. So you could buy the audio file, and just like we did if you did xLights around the world, that same concept, but you wouldn't necessarily need to have the tool, I don't believe. xLights would do that for you. They haven't added the capability for Audacity yet. I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's a technical reason or otherwise. So obviously that's going to get a little bit better. But today, if you edit those files and you edit that sequence and you were to share that sequence, you would have to share at least that project file, let them know the original audio file where you got it, and then they would have to go through and render that through Audacity themselves to get that same audio file.
Okay.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. I really appreciate it. Great presentation. A lot of great information. So.
Thanks.
The xLights project exists because of people like you. Help continue the project by making a donation today at xlights.org/donate.